Alright, so funny how in the last video I spoke about that we function on frequencies and how we are a massive living energy. When you break your body down to the simplest form, it's basically just trillions of cells. You know, you've got viruses, bacteria, you've got the major fluids in the body, you know what I'm saying, blood and lymph, and you're mainly predominantly water. When you start to really, you know, just dismantle the whole micro macro side of shit, mainly water. Okay, now water holds memory, holds vibration and whatnot. It's programmable, you know, and the thing that it makes it possible to do that is our consciousness, our higher faculties that we have over the rest of the animal kingdom. Okay, now I went to pick up my son in school. This happened a long time ago, right? Like last year. And I remember that I got a call from the teacher, and she was like, you know, kind of like startled, you know, oh my goodness, your son said a bad word. I had to put him in timeout. And I'm like, oh man. And I'm thinking he said like a detrimental word, something he may have picked up, you know, in the house, maybe when I say something, when I'm talking to my friends and whatnot. So I'm like, all right, cool. I went to pick him up afterwards, you know, when it was time to pick him up. And I said, you know, she's like, oh my goodness, I had to put him in timeout. She was like, still pretty like fucked up about it. And I was like, well, what word did he say? And she's like, H-E double hockey sticks. Like that. It just, what the he said hell. And she was like, oh, you know, I was like, what the fuck? I didn't say that shit to her, but I'm like, all right, I mean, I'll talk to him. So basically he came in the car and he's like, you know, he's looking at me because he knows he's in trouble and whatnot. And this is the point where I had to pretty much guide him, and you do this with love, and more or less to have him fulfill his social contract and actually be conducive to society, right? But the whole thing is that I told him, I was like, bro, it's not really a bad word, but don't use it in class. I mean, you see how the teacher got all bent out of shape about it, so just don't use that word. You know, whatever word they don't want you to use, just don't use them, you know? The whole thing is that it's all rooted out of like fear. And this is how religion operates. It's like, it's all operating in a space where it keeps you in fear, okay? And when you're in fear, you're really not thinking, you're looking to just follow. You get what I'm saying? You're looking to follow and stay away from doing bad because you're afraid of consequences. You know how many people I come across at times that wish they could do certain things because they've got a lot of, let's say, hatred in their heart or whatnot. And sometimes I say, well, shit, you know, I feel like they don't go through with what they want to do truly because they're afraid to go to jail, or they're afraid they're going to go to hell. You get what I'm saying? Some men aren't even happy with their partner, but because their religious system says that if they break up, they're breaking the household or whatnot. And this basically is against God and whatnot. So they live a life of pretty much a hellish state. So they put themselves in hell and they think they're going to hell when they die if they get out of that position and whatnot. It's kind of like a really weird situation to even be in. But the whole thing is that when you look at this position of fear, or let's say not wanting to go to jail and whatnot, I feel like you're living your life very, very hypocritically. You see, the thing is I'm not advocating or saying that, you know, going through with things that aren't fulfilling your social contract is something you should do. The reason that these things are occurring is because you have a disconnect with yourself to begin with, right? And this is the thing, that's why you can't be taught Christ consciousness. This is a realization, but it comes down to you knowing that all the things that you are trying to seek outside of you are within you, right? And the whole thing is, like I even mentioned in the previous video, when you start to see these situations in your life where it appears to be a hellish state, this is where you sit back and it's an opportunity for you to do something different. And but it comes down to this, to finding self. And when you operate from a space of love and trust within yourself, you're opening up the doors to favorable conditions, what we would call the good side of the force, to work in your favor. You know what I'm saying? If you're on the negative side of things, see, the negative side of things isn't designed for fear or anything like that. It's actually designed for power, empowerment, to be honest with you. Because if you're going to go on the dark side of the force, all right, if we want to call it, bad and good, there is no bad and good. There just is. It's just polarities, because you're here to, you're trained to believe in duality. That's the problem. When you are in a space that's not favorable for you here in this life, what do people tend to want to do? They go left-hand path, right? They don't stay in that path. They want to be opposing or adversary to the positions they were originally in, that people tell you is good, but you don't feel good about it. But going left-hand path doesn't mean you necessarily create chaos and destruction for others. You're basically creating the chaos and destruction for what you were once doing, to basically dismantle and destroy what you were doing, to open up space for something new. That's all it is, right? But the fear is the illusion. That's the whole thing. It's the illusion because you're fearing something outside of you, when in actuality there's nothing really outside of you to fear. Okay, you should fear to fear itself, If you're in a position now where you're going left-hand path, you know how they say the destroyer of worlds, the god of chaos. Yeah, what you once had, you're destroying, and when you destroy it, you created it through chaos, but now you make order and build something new. You're here to create. You get what I'm saying? That's what separates us from the rest of the animals. So you're here to create. So now when you went left-hand path, now you're opposing what you want, what you were once doing. You're being Satanist. You're being satanic. See, that's why the word Satan comes from the word adversary or opposing. Meanwhile, this is why when you got Christianity and you got all these people who are trying to be on the light side of the force, sometimes they think they're being a service to others because the thing is, I heard this from somebody and I thought this was very wise, but darkness or the dark side doesn't want to be disturbed, but the light disturbs. The light side disturbs. And when you look at light side, you can see this through people trying to convert others to Christianity, or saying, spreading the word of God, but you're spreading the word of God outside of you and not what you're actually believing or authentically speaking from the heart. This is why Jesus pointed to the heart. What's truly in your heart or in your space is what's going to be impactful for others, right? So this is why sometimes, integrating the shadow aspects of yourself, they're only in the shadows because you hid them there from society, because you said, well, society deems them unacceptable, so I'm going to hide it and put it in a closet. And what happens is that these things got so big that they create chaos in your life. And the whole thing is that if you integrate them, this is where many of the times your blessings are there in disguise, because this is your true authentic self. But the reason why, if you now express them in a healthy way, society will deem them acceptable. But why? Because you deemed them acceptable first. It's no different than, when you got the saying, others will see you how you see yourself first. So you have to accept these things first before you expect others to accept these things from you. You have to have, it's got to come from a space of unconditional love. So it's basically like the animals, right? I spoke about it in the previous video. The animals are loyal to you. And then we come from the question of, are animals truly what the embodiment of love is, right? It is, because it's rooted out of trust. When the animal trusts you, right, it depends on you. And it trusts that you're going to take care of it. And when you're taking care of it, it's a relationship that grows, because, see, love is a building harmonious frequency. So now they bond with you. They may give you, a loving little bond where, let's say cats start rubbing on you, or the dog wants to play with you, or the dog, and this is aside from just being the food part. You know what I'm saying? Because the survival state is basically one of the most important things, but the survival state can kick you into a unfavorable conditions when you're actually hungry, right? So the animal kicks in, right? Let's say, for example, I see all the cats, they may sleep with each other, cuddle with each other and whatnot in my garden. But when it's time to eat, I mean, they're basically hissing and scratching at each other, and even potentially chase some of one another off, whichever one is the alpha, right? And this is what humans do. And humans will do this when they are hungry for resources, when they see that they're in competition. There's truly no competition, though. You can observe this in nature. This is why I appeal to nature, saying nature is God, because nature is a perfect blueprint to know, just like even the Bible tells you, except you're reading it wrong. You may read nature wrong. You know what I'm saying? But if you look at nature, you got all these trees growing with each other. Even some trees are more acid loving than others, yet they're all growing together. Meanwhile, when you create a garden, they'll tell you, oh, don't plant this with that, or don't plant them too close together because they compete for nutrients. Only when the conditions are right, they're competing for nutrients, right? But in the forest, all the conditions are perfect. So they're actually helping and feeding each other through a system called a mycelium network. Now, we don't have this network with each other because we're basically in isolated consciousness. And this is the thing. There is no separation between you and I when you're looking at it through the eyes of God. You know what I'm saying? The only illusion of separation you got is when you're looking at it through these blinds, right? But if you go to a quantum level, and the only reason I speak a lot about quantum, I mean, a lot of people try to find things in the most complicated forms. And when something's so simple, they discard it, or it may just be overlooked because it's right in your face sometimes, so simple. How is it not simple? When you go to CERN, they're trying to find God through a particle. Like you got the God particle. They're trying to discover God through a particle. So they're going through the God particle, and then when we look at, for example, let's say out of the concept of right and wrong, right? We got right and wrong, good and evil. Why I say good disturbs at times. At times, the ones that are good don't realize. And see, nobody wants to ever position themselves in the possibility that they're the ones that are evil. Would you be opposing evil, but you are actually evil yourself? Would you ever have that realization, though? You get what I'm saying? And what does evil even mean? I'll leave that for you to ponder, because I've spoke about that in previous videos as well. But you got, for example, religious, zealots. They want to, go to your house and try to convert you or spread the word of God and whatnot. You got vegans, right? Vegans are another religion, and they want to oppose evil on the planet by disturbing businesses, going in there with TVs, showing you these animals getting tortured, ripped apart and whatnot. And they will also tell you that what you're doing is wrong, and they will shame you for it. They'll say, shame on you. And I've heard a little chant, they say, shame on you for what you do, And this is judgment. They're passing judgment onto somebody else. You know what I'm saying? And the whole thing is that they're positioning themselves in a position of God, because in actuality, it is very true that only God can judge you, right? So they're putting themselves in that position. And if they're going to put themselves in that position, then they better also come and be responsible for all the baggage that comes with that. Now, the only reason factory farms even exist is because humanity is out of control with the amount of animal products that they eat. But this is not even the fault necessarily of only the people. It is actually the people in charge of the people that have you programmed to believe that you're supposed to ingest all this animal protein. You know what I'm saying? When in actuality, you don't need to even eat meat. And if you were to be the type of person, because you're not gonna make the world vegan. It's impossible. That's like abolishing evil. It's not gonna happen. In order for good to exist, evil has to exist. For veganism to exist, carnivorism has to exist. So if you want to put carnivorism as like, the the bad guys of the Force, you know, they're the color red. They're like basically in the lower spectrum of your chakra system. You got green for like vegans. This is basically the gateway. But it's the gateway where if it goes into the upper realms, it could go into the upper realms corrupt or not. And Jesus, for example, when you got religion, it points to the heart. That's the green chakra, right? And if you're going to come from this space where, because veganism, look, you hear debates like, you got certain, you know, debaters, and they'll come and say, well, you know, I was in your shoes at one point, but now I'm a vegan. That, see, just saying that is like saying I was once bad, but I'm good now, and I'm trying to convince you that you could be good now too. You know what I'm saying? When in actuality, it's not wrong to eat meat. You get what I'm saying? For one, if you even understood what animals are not beings. They're not beings. All right? They're a reflection of you. A mirror of you, just the same way if you really want to observe on a scientific level, the observer theory, and they call them theories only because science and spirituality is separate. But when you actually understand this, you will come from a space of knowing. And I know what the fuck I'm talking about. Okay? There is really nobody outside of you. There's nothing. Even the people, to me, are considered NPCs at times. Okay? And animals, okay, don't have the higher capacity or faculties that humans do. Okay? So let me explain this. Humans, okay, have the ability to have a Christ consciousness, right? Have the ability to have a metaphysical experience. Animals, for example, are not able to do that. Animals cannot create their reality. And when I say metaphysical experience or Christ consciousness, okay, they say in the Bible, man has dominion over the animals for this reason. But animals, for example, they don't, they're like the root chakra of your body, okay? They are basically there, and they're there to show you who and what you are. And when I say metaphysical, it's like this. A person who is very poor can't fathom being a millionaire, but that's a consciousness, right? A rich person wouldn't want anything to do with poverty consciousness, to the point where they won't even engage with people who have even a communication or talks or mentality of poverty, because they're afraid that it's going to pollute their mind, right? But the whole thing is that an animal, for example, would an animal be able to tell if they're a millionaire or if they're in poverty? See, the reason why they look at animals and say animals are like an embodiment of love is because if you have a dog and you take him to a mansion and, you know, he's living around all the riches, a Lamborghini, you know, private jets and whatnot, flies in private jets and shit, or living in an apartment complex, do you think the animal knows the difference between it, that it's rich, or if it's actually living in poverty? It only cares about you. That's it, right? The same way your animalistic nature is neutral, right? Everything in nature is neutral. Money is neutral. Everything's neutral, right? It only cares about you, your attention, your what you consider sacred, because the sacred is what you focus on, right? So animalistic people are in the fallen state. This is really the fallen state. This is why people, like I mentioned the example of the cats, this is why we go to wars with each other. The people fighting for resources don't see the unity in each other. This is basically like animals not being able to tell if they're rich or poor. So humans would not know Christ consciousness if they're in their animalistic nature. They have to overcome, or, you know, overcome humanity, which is the animal in its existence, right? But but the thing is, the animal nature is your power. That's your stability, okay? But it has to stay down. Let's call that the demonic side. It has to stay down there. It can be integrated and work in harmony, but it's no different than the mycelium network. It can't live above ground. It has to live underground. But it depends on what's happening above for it to get fed. If not, it will consume you, okay? This is why there's a lot of power there, because it's the generating force. Okay, when you got, for example, the mycelium network, it has to live underground, and it feeds the tree underneath. If not, then that's where you see mushrooms growing on the side of the tree, on the logs of the tree, on the trunk. It's because now that mycelium network is feeding off the tree, because it's no longer getting fed by the tree, because something happened. The tree got sick. Something happened, right? It's the same exact thing, right? These things can work with you or can work against you. But how do they work against you? This is why the health of the body is important. Breathing properly is important. Healthy mental state, what you're consuming. If you're consuming genetically modified foods, they have a genetically modified way of controlling your mindset to some extent, because you are what you eat and what you eat becomes you. Jesus Christ being presented to you as a man is kind of like a program, okay? To have you follow another man, because it's a symbol. All it is a symbol of you. You're supposed to service others, but worship literally yourself. But I know that sounds demonic and satanic to some people. You know what I'm saying? But that's the whole thing. This man that you, because how is it not a symbol when you got black people now changing Jesus Christ from a white man to a black man now? You know what I'm saying? You've got so many other deities closely equated to the same exact story of Christ. They're all talking about the same thing. You know? And when you have this this type of mentality, for example, they took the representation of what the sun is, right? But then this goes beyond that too. It goes metaphysical, because the sun is really within you. But in order for your conscious mind to be able to grasp and intellectualize and compartmentalize the idea of what Christ is, they have to use it and anthropomorphize it, because your subconscious mind only works in symbols. So you get programmed now to follow a man, right? And the really, what is life? Life is basically the experience that you have around you, the warmth that you feel from the sun, right? But is the sun really hot? You get what I'm saying? What is it? Think about it. You have your experience. Where does that experience? Do you think that's the air you're breathing, Neo? You know, you hear all that type of stuff. This camera's gonna cut off soon, so I'm gonna tie another part in another video. But basically, that's why you can't teach Christ consciousness. But the only way that you can realize Christ consciousness, that's why meditation is very important, because you're going to your church. You disconnect the conscious mind, right? You go into no thing. You're nothing again. You're emptying the cup. You empty out what you think you know, what you're programmed to believe in, because belief, you see, you have to believe in this reality in order for it to exist, and it requires followers. So the collective has to believe in it for the reality to exist. Good and bad has to exist. That's why this reality's, ran on movements, because it creates duality. You have to believe in all that, right? That's why this whole thing is religious. This whole system is religious. The whole reality you live in is a religion, right? But the real church is your body. But I'm going to make another video. We'll talk soon.